This story originally appeared on The Athletic, the best place to read about football online. Visit www.theathletic.co.uk/Tifo Football for a 30-day free trial and 50% off an annual subscription. Even when Manchester United were flying during Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's stint as caretaker manager last season, there was something unconvincing about their expected goal numbers. United's first 12 Premier League matches under Solskjaer saw them go unbeaten, with a total goal difference of +20, and, as a result, his permanent appointment became inevitable. The expected goals numbers were less convincing. According to Understat, they should have scored 25.6 goals and conceded 13.7 for a total XGD of +11.9. Now this was still a positive situation, but it suggested United's goal return was almost twice as good as you would expect, based upon the chances they created and allowed to the opposition. Now many attempted to come up with explanations as for why United's figures outperformed the XG. Players such as Anthony Martial and Paul Pogba looked liberated after the departure of Mourinho, while there was an argument that Solskjaer, a master finisher in his own playing days, might have improved Marcus Rashford's composure in front of goal. It's rare, however, for a side to outperform their XG numbers consistently, and so it has proved with the peculiar pattern that's emerged. Using the XG metric, it becomes clear that United have actually defended even better than the raw numbers would suggest. In fact, they are the best side in the league defensively, with the lowest XGA figure, effectively a measure of chances conceded at 6.2. For the purposes of comparison, Liverpool are on 7.4 and every other Premier League side is on 9.5 or more. So how about at the other end? Well, strangely, United aren't bad there either. They have managed 12.1 XG in attack, which doesn't sound particularly impressive from 8 matches and is less than half of Manchester City's figure, but it's nevertheless the 5th best figure in the division, behind only City, Liverpool, Chelsea and somewhat surprisingly Southampton. So, the first question. At what stage did United start performing worse than their XG figures? Well, essentially, the rot set in towards the end of last season, particularly in the final 5 games when United scored just twice from 5.7 XG and conceded 10 times from 6.1 XGA. Solskjaer's 18th game in charge, a 2-0 defeat to Manchester City, a harsh reflection of a game that was 0.5 in XG terms, was the moment United's cumulative goal difference under Solskjaer fell below the expected numbers, and it's never recovered. Indeed, it hasn't recovered in dramatic fashion. But the aforementioned numbers, suggesting United have the best defence and the 5th best attack in the league, are bewildering to anyone who's watched recent matches. So, how on earth have they racked up these numbers while seemingly playing so terribly? Well, a partial explanation is simple. United's good performances came a while ago. From their first 4 matches of the campaign, their overall expected goal difference was 4.79, whereas in the last 4, it's been just 1.2. Yes, it's still notable that United have only been outshot in terms of XG once this season, in the 1-1 home draw with Arsenal. More than anything else, it seems they're suffering from poor finishing. So the figure to investigate is that 9 goals from 12.1 XG. Their shot conversion rate of 9.3% is the 5th worst in the league. So should we point the finger at the forwards, and in particular the seemingly off-form Rashford? Well, not entirely. It seems United's finishing and open play has been decent enough, 7 goals from 6.23 XG. Their real issue has been not being clinical enough from set-piece chances. Once you consider corners, free kicks, both those shot directly and those crossed or taken short, and penalties, United's figures make for disappointing reading. They've scored 2 goals from 6 XG. The chief offenders here are Pogba and Rashford, who've both missed penalties at crucial stages. Pogba in the draw at Wolves, Rashford in the home defeat to Crystal Palace. But there's also another surprise culprit, Harry Maguire. The centre-back wasn't bought for his goal scoring, but in United's 2 defeats before the international break, away at West Ham and Newcastle, Maguire wasted their best chance in each game. But this of course is also a damning indictment of United. Solskjaer has turned them into a side who have pressure and then create chances from set pieces rather than a side that can penetrate the opposition in open play. Once you restrict XG figures to open play, only Crystal Palace, Bournemouth and Newcastle have created less. United's performance in the 1-0 defeat against Newcastle was their worst of the season so far. They recorded just 1 XG against a side who conceded 5 goals the previous weekend. The biggest problem was the inability of their midfielders to play line-breaking passes through the opposition midfield. Now, it can be difficult playing against a deep 5-4-1, but the combination of Sean and Matty Longstaff shouldn't have looked quite so comfortable throughout. Fantastic story though it was a humiliation for Solskjaer's side, who'd allowed a 19-year-old debutant to shine. Now, United had no obvious plan for breaking down Newcastle. They didn't focus on switching play quickly to drag them across the pitch, while the midfield combination of Scott McTominay and Fred moved the ball slowly and rarely looked capable of threading forward passes between opponents. A pertinent example occurred on 33 minutes, when a goal kick dropped to Fred, who was in plenty of space and had the opportunity to slip a first-time pass to Juan Mata, who was in a good position to drive forward with the ball. But Fred's touch was poor, and he didn't have the confidence to play the ball into Mata with his second touch, so instead he played it backwards to Maguire. Note Mata's frustration at that point. Maguire was then more positive with his distribution, feeding the ball between Newcastle's midfielders and into Mata. But rather than receiving it on the half-turn and moving into a dangerous position, Mata then plays an easy pass out to left-back Ashley Young, allowing Newcastle to get men behind the ball. This showed two separate United problems. The first is that the central midfield partnership used in this game isn't good enough. Yes, United were without Pogba, who offers more composure and incision with the ball, but it was nevertheless frustrating to watch Fred and McTominay concede possession so cheaply. Even when there was ample space to feed the ball into Mata or others between the lines, they often passed straight to opponents. Early on, Fred managed to pick out Matty Longstaff when a simple forwards pass to Mata was on. McTominay often did something similar, at one point passing to Kieran Clark rather than Rashford or Andres Pereira. And perhaps most frustrating was that duo's lack of tactical understanding. United, who'd thrived in Solskjaer's early days when playing on the break, effectively turned down counter-attacking opportunities, failing to take advantage when Newcastle's lines were stretched and midfielders were out of the game. Here, shortly after a corner, Newcastle were completely disorganised and McTominay had the opportunity to bring the ball forward or find a teammate on the run. But after a sideways and then a backwards pass, United allowed Newcastle to recover. The ball ends up back with McTominay 20 yards higher up the pitch, but by then with 9 well-assembled Newcastle players between him and the goal. Another issue was Mata. Once arguably the most decisive number 10 in the Premier League, for long periods Mata looked like he'd forgotten how to play the position. First, he started the game positioning himself permanently towards United's left. Now, perhaps this was a deliberate tactic to get him playing combinations with Daniel James in behind DeAndre Yedlin, but it meant that when Newcastle left space between the lines, Mata wasn't in a position to exploit it. Therefore, when Manchester United did play passes into him, it didn't actually help them cut through Newcastle's block, they simply went around it. Any attempted combination with James, meanwhile, didn't work. A curious example shows United in a great position from that move. James with the ball at his feet and about to speed behind the opposition fullback, and Mata waiting to play the wall pass. But at the last moment, Mata suddenly shifts himself a couple of yards deeper. James plays the ball towards where he'd previously been stood, and then looks exasperated at Mata's decision to change his position. And, as in the first example, when Maguire fired balls into Mata's feet, he wasn't brave enough with his next move. This situation seems the perfect opportunity to get Mata dribbling into the number 10 position, but he passes the ball back to Fred and Newcastle are now comfortable. Here the same thing happens again. Mata not quite between the lines, but at least Maguire's pass penetrated Newcastle's midfield. Mata though knocked the ball backwards to Young. The common theme though is that Maguire was attempting to be positive with his distribution. In fact, both centre-backs showed great confidence on the ball. Manchester United's best passing move of the first half, which ended with McTominay being put through on goal but being flagged offside, started with Axel Tuanzebe playing a good forward pass to Pereira, who then flicked the ball inside to Rashford. It was usually Maguire who generated United's best moments. Whereas the central midfielders showed an inability to recognise when to attack, here Maguire received the ball with Newcastle's wide players not in position. He carries the ball fully 40 yards before offloading. In truth, he could have played a more ambitious pass here to Rashford, but at least he was progressing the ball. Now, this became a familiar pattern. Maguire was effectively United's deep-lying playmaker. Sometimes he received the ball and found Fred was actually blocking the passing lanes into teammates, and increasingly started moving the ball forward into Fred's position. If Maguire thought that Fred could use the ball well in that position, he would play the pass. Instead, he took matters into his own hands. And rightly so, because Maguire can spot and play the passes that Fred and McTominay cannot. In this example, he arrowed a pass to Pereira, who found himself in the right position between the lines. Pereira shot from range when perhaps he should have slipped in James, but still Maguire was moving the ball into the right areas, inadvertently illustrating what United lack in midfield. So, while a disappointing attacking output is often blamed on the centre-forwards missing chances or on playmakers not creating enough, United's problem is much more about the collective and how they move the ball in deep positions, particularly in the central midfield zone. Solskjaer has frequently spoken about recreating the spirit of United's 1999 treble season without ever truly explaining what that entails tactically. But perhaps he's achieved it. This United, like in the dying stages of that incredible European Cup final win over Bayern Munich, seems somewhat reliant on chucking the ball into the box at corners.
Today's story, written by Michael Cox, originally appeared on The Athletic, the best place to read about football online. Whether it's more tactical insight, dedicated local reporting about your team, or rich storytelling from around the world, you'll find it all in one place. And there's an update on today's story. To find out how Manchester United used their fullbacks tactically to frustrate Liverpool last weekend, visit www.theathletic.co.uk/Tifo Football for a 30-day free trial and 50% off an annual subscription. To support Tifo, support The Athletic. Thank you for watching.